Hello and welcome to the Society of the Common. Today we are talking about the bread of life. Now, this is an interesting discussion. There's a lot of people who were following Jesus right after he performed that miracle where he fed 5,000 people. And so I wanted to take some time and go through the next section, what happens next. So I have the ESV here, and we're just going to read straight out of the ESV in John 6:22, and we're going to check out exactly what happens. So let's start at the top here. On the next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that there had been only one boat there, that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but the disciples had gone away alone. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into boats and went to Capernaum, to seeking Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" And Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me, not because of the signs, but because you ate your fill of loaves." So they asked a question, "When did you come here?" Jesus doesn't answer the question. He skips right to their motives, what they're looking for. And he has a remark against their motives because they're trying to get something from Jesus. But Jesus says, don't, on 27, do not work for the food that perishes, right? So they're doing all this work to get fed more by Jesus, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal. So we see an interesting contrast here. They want food that fills their bellies to sustain the life that they have, that was given to them at birth. But Jesus says, don't work for that food, but instead work for the food that endures to eternal life. Now, these Jews who were following Jesus had an idea of eternal life. And if we skip over to earlier in John 5, we see that Jesus says, you search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life. So inside the scriptures, you can earn eternal life. And this most likely was in reference to the law. People thought that they could earn eternal life through the law. But Jesus says, and it is they that bear witness about me, yet you refuse to come to me that you may have life. So the scriptures are referring to Jesus as the one who has eternal life, but they're missing that point and finding their eternal life in the law. So they knew about eternal life. And so let's go back real quick, because they're going to ask him, okay, well, what must we do? Like to be doing the works of God. Because earlier he said that do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life. So he says there is food that you must work for that endures to eternal life. So they ask, what must we do to be doing the works of God? And Jesus answers them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him who he has sent. So it has nothing to do with the law or what they found in the scriptures, but it's it's just simply believing in him who he has sent. So they said to him, what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. And so go back here earlier in John, right? The works that the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works that I am doing, bear witness about me. So the miracle that he performed earlier, that bore witness that Jesus is who he says he is, because he performed the work that God gave him. But they're asking for another sign here. And they make a bit of an error when they say, our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses. They thought it was Moses, right? Moses gave a sign, and that's how the authority was found in the law. He gave a sign of manna. But Jesus says, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you true bread from heaven. Now it's interesting, the manna that fell from heaven did sustain their earthly lives. So that life that they have now, that they're looking to fill their bellies with, is the same life that they're saying that Moses gave to them in the form of manna. But Jesus is saying, quit worrying about that form of bread. There's a second form of bread, true bread, he says, from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And Jesus is referring to himself here. And they said, Sir, give us this bread always. Now Jesus answered them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. But I say to you that you have seen me, and yet you do not believe. All that the Father gives me will come to me. Whoever comes to me, I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all he has given me, but raise it up on the last day. So Jesus is saying that he's this bread of life, and that God has sent him on a specific mission to come to earth and to lose no one whom the Father gives him. So it's as though Jesus is saying now that he is come to earth to distribute this bread. And whoever God sets before him to give him the bread, he won't lose. There is no other reason for Jesus to come to this earth but to dispense this bread of life. And in fact, he is the bread of life. And we're going to see how in just a little bit. So we just finished 39. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks upon the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. So Jesus is saying that God's will is that anyone who believes in his Son is to be given eternal life. So that's the reason Jesus came down, and he's fulfilling that. He's saying, I am the bread, and whoever believes in me will have eternal life, because that is the Father's will. If we remember up here, it said, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. So they're parallel, right? Believing in Jesus is the will of God, right? And that anyone who believes in him should have eternal life. And I will raise him up on the last day. It's the reference to the second coming. It's the reference to glorified bodies. It's the reference to eternal life. A life that surpasses this earthly life that we're all given, right? But everyone should know by now that that life has an expiration date. Because of sin, we all must die. Now, let's jump over here to Hebrews 9. And there's an interesting passage here. It says, but as it is, he has appeared once and for all, and this is in reference to Jesus, at the end of the ages to put away sin by a sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, right? That expiration of life. And after that comes judgment. So Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear for a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him, who believed in him. All right, so that is a lot of the same language, where he'll appear a second time, right? And back here on the last day. So the Jews grumbled about him because he said, I am the bread that come down from heaven. They said, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? how does he now say, I have come down from heaven? Now Jesus answered them, do not grumble among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. Right here, no one comes to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. I think this is in reference to their grumbling, the fact that these Jews are saying, "Wait a second, we know this guy. He has a family that we all know. He's just like us. Why is he saying, I have come down from heaven?" Now they're missing obviously the things that justify Jesus in his work, just like we read earlier, that him doing his miracles and doing what the Father asked him to do, the very works that I'm doing bear witness about me, right? And and now he's saying that if you can't see this, it's because the Father has not drawn you to him. And then let's continue. And I will raise him up on the last day. Again, the last day is, it is written in the prophets that they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. So this is interesting. This is a reference to, I think, Isaiah 54, where he's crying out. He's saying, if only God would come down and teach us directly, face to face, like something so personal that we all could see it and all understand it. But Jesus is saying right here, essentially that is happening with him being here. He's saying, and they will all be taught by everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Not that everyone has seen the Father. He who is from God, he who has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Jesus identifying himself as the bread that someone will eat to have eternal life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died, right? This is the bread that comes down from heaven that one may eat of and not die. Two different breads. One sustains your earthly life. One gives you eternal life, a life that is from God, the life that is Jesus. That's why he is that bread. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. He says it so many different ways to make it abundantly clear. And the bread that I will give for the world, for the life of the world, is my flesh. So here was that point, right? The bread that I will give, his mission from God is to come down and give this bread for the life of the world, is his flesh. Now, the flesh, an interesting point here. He's trading the life of the world, right? Giving an opportunity for the world to have eternal life for his flesh. Now, if we pop back over to Hebrews again, what does he say? But as has appeared once and for all at the end of the ages, to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, or more accurately here, the sacrifice of his flesh, right? He's come down to sacrifice his flesh for the life of the world. This is the exchange, right? So the Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, how can this man give us flesh to eat, right? They don't have the foresight. They don't have the spiritual wisdom. They don't have the knowledge from God. So they are reading it on the surface. How can this man give us flesh to eat? And so Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat of the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, my blood is true drink. Whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever feeds on me, he also will live because of me. Yeah, we see that it's not a flesh and blood drinking that gives you eternal life. It's that sacrifice. It's that flesh given for the world's life. And his blood is the blood that was spilled. You know, it all goes back to the sacrifices, right? We have the picture of that in the book of Hebrews, where the sprinkling of the blood and the sacrifices atone for sins once, right? Once a year. But the perfect sacrifice, right? We understand that atones for all time. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father. So Jesus is saying that his life source is from the Father. And so whoever feeds on him or believes on him, as we read earlier, he also will live because of me. So in a way that Jesus calls himself the bread because it's the delivery. Jesus is the delivery mechanism for eternal life. Just as food is the delivery mechanism for nutrients that give our body life and sustains the life here on earth. Jesus is that delivery mechanism. Whoever feeds on him, whoever believes him, who puts his trust in him, will live. Now, the Father, and he acknowledges right here, I live because of the Father. His source of life is from the Father, right? So when we feed on Jesus, when we believe on Jesus, we're obtaining the life that comes directly from the Father. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like the bread the fathers ate and died. Whoever feeds on this bread will live forever. All right. So Jesus said these things in the synagogue as he taught at Capernaum. So now everyone's freaked out because Jesus just said that you have to be cannibals to live forever. So many of his disciples heard it and they said, this is a hard saying. Who can listen to it? But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples were grumbling about this, said to them, do you take offense at this? And what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he has been before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh is no help at all. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. And there are some of you who do not believe. So Jesus takes it a little bit closer to his disciples. He's saying that this is not flesh. We're not talking about physically eating Jesus' body's flesh. We're talking about a spiritual matter. It is the Spirit who gives this life, this eternal life, this life that's outside of the life that we've been given here on earth. It's a spiritual life that he's talking about. And it's the Spirit who gives this life. The flesh is no help at all. The words that I've spoken to you are spirit and life. Now, Jesus references that there are some who do not believe. For Jesus knew from the beginning that those were who did not believe, and who it was who would betray him. And he said, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by the Father. So it's interesting. He essentially is saying right here that there are some who don't believe, and he's probably referring to Judas, because it has not been granted him by the Father. The Father had not drawn Judas to him. After this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. Now, and he also could be referring to those disciples right there too. Do you want to go away as well? He said to the 12. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom else shall we go? You alone have the words of eternal life. And we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. And Jesus answered him, did I not choose you, the 12, and yet one of you is a devil? He spoke of Judas. Yeah, it's this line from Peter Lord, to whom shall we go? Who else is there? Who else has the words of eternal life? Who else can help them? I mean, Jesus already explained earlier that people have been searching the scriptures for ways to have this eternal life. But it was the scriptures who were bearing witness or pointing the way to Jesus. Yet people are refusing to come to him to have that life. So without Jesus, Simon Peter sees nowhere else to go. You alone have the words of eternal life. And we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. This verse actually is the reason my son is named Peter. Just a pure declaration of faith. There's nowhere else to go. You alone have the words of life. So that pretty much concludes what we set out to discuss. We started with these people who were hungry and saw Jesus as an opportunity to fill their bellies and make their flesh happy, feed their flesh. But what it really came down to was that Jesus' mission on this earth has nothing to do with feeding people or even making them well or providing a nice home for them. It has nothing to do with these earthly things. It has everything to do with God's mission for him. And God's mission for him was to be the dispensary, or to be the way that people obtain eternal life. Because without God's intervention, we were all doomed to the expiration of our life. We were all doomed to the inevitable death that we see in Romans 3 and we see in Romans 6. The wages of sin is death. But the gift of God is eternal life. It is in direct contrast. God has a specific purpose in Jesus' arrival here. So he explains to them that you guys are seeking this food, this bread, to fill your bellies now, when you don't even understand that your souls are starved and dead, and you need eternal life. And God draws people to him to receive this eternal life. And everyone that God brings to Jesus, Jesus will be faithful for. He will be faithful with. He will deliver them and raise them up on the last day and give them that life. All right, well, thanks, guys. I hope this has been encouraging. It has been a blessed study. And until next time.